almost summertime. And we all live here in Georgia. What is the worst smell that you can come across in the state of Georgia on a hot summer day?
It's the stench of a dead animal.
Stench of a dead animal. That is correct. That is one of the worst smells that you could possibly ever get. What?
I was gonna say what are they called?
Those trees?
Yes, those trees.
Yes, rapper pear trees, yes. They smell like
No,
that.
if you put that,
Yes,
those ones.
yes, they smell like that too. But there's nothing worse than driving with the windows down and you see a dead bloated up deer and it just stinks. Imagine being in a desert and having a dead. I suppose it was just bottled up. And I suppose that it was just a way for the tears to find their way out of her. All I know is that when hands were laid on her during the baptism of the Spirit, nothing really startling happened except for that from the very first time she said she felt warm and actually wanted it. What better feeling is that than to feel love and feel like you were wanted? She said she could feel that she could be herself. And as she came home, she realized that she wanted to cry. So she did. And no one stopped her, no one made fun of her, and nobody said it was wrong. And it was a relief for her. Sigmund Freud, one of the most leading founding fathers of psychology, once said, at times, the things our conscience tells us is wrong is actually just a repetition of what your parents taught you, or what the world around us says that when we were children. Well, whether that is true or not, what is true is that for many years, especially here in the South, men are told not to cry. I was told that growing up. Boys don't cry. Get over it. Dust some dirt on you, get the dust off of your legs, and get up and keep on going. Now, I've been to a lot of funerals where people speak with admiration of widows who do not cry. I've seen women, when I perform funerals, that don't cry at all. Part of me thinks that they're just so over the emotion that they have no more tears left to cry. But I've been to funerals where it's almost hard to get through the sermon because people are crying so much. I was at a funeral 2 years ago. I was performing alongside two other pastors. We had a tragedy that happened here in Meriwether County, and 2 high school girls were killed in a car wreck. High school, one of them was a senior. It was an awful, awful tragedy. The dad did not cry at all. And for me, it struck me as like, if that was my daughter, I would want to be in the urn with her. There's no way that I would want to live without my daughter, but he did not cry at all. It's different in many places in the world, and I still remember the sheer abandon of widows in Israel after they were in 1967. I remember watching it on History Channel and stuff. It was so contrast to an American people. I once visited a widow who had lost her husband, and she didn't shed a tear. I visited her for 6 months, and she never cried. But one day, I walked up on her, and she was just bawling her eyes out. Her dog had just died. I thought it was crazy. She didn't cry for her husband, who she'd been married to for 42 years. But all of a sudden, she started crying because her dog of 6 years got hit by a car. I found it odd. Why is it okay to cry for some things and not for others? So, what happens in situations like this? I think the honest truth is that we are afraid to be seen as we are. We're afraid of what people call emotionalism, afraid of the things that are deeply buried inside ourselves, which we think would overwhelm others if we really let them go. So we lock up our emotions, not realizing that if we do show our emotions, that we may not be able to cut those emotions off. I wonder if some of the so-called nervous breakdowns which people experience, I see a lot of students that have emotional breakdowns or anxiety attacks and things along those lines. I wonder if it would even happen if we actually allowed ourselves to vent, to cry, to show the emotions that are inside our hearts and souls. Well, nervous breakdown is often a sign of failure in the eyes of society. It's actually all right to be a failure. I do realize, of course, that some people use tears for blackmail or self-pity. I also recognize that in the case of severe depressive illness, excessive crying can be dangerous, so that we have to lead the person away from looking at self to see what God has already done. But let's move on. Not only is it therapeutic and healing to shed tears for our own pain, it can be wonderful healing and shed tears for another person's pain. How many of you have actually sat down and cried beside somebody because somebody was so upset? I have. My brother, my twin brother, I'm the more handsome, he's a cop. And about 10 years ago, his partner was killed, shot in the head, making a routine house call. My brother was beside us, and he didn't know what to do. Now, my brother and I were not very close, but I felt that pain. And I felt the overwhelming emotion of losing somebody very important. I remember sitting in the counseling room with a girl who had a terrible self-image. At the age of 30 or more, she felt abandoned by life and alone, lost, and she felt like no one loved her. Her life story poured out, and as I listened, I found myself weighed down with a terrible loss, her loss. And I wanted to speak words to comfort her, but nothing would come out. As I listened to her the second time and then the third, I found myself praying, Lord, show her that you love her and accept her. Show her that she is not alone. Give me the words to speak to comfort her, but no words would come. That can be hard sometimes. How many of y'all have ever wanted to comfort somebody and you just didn't know the words to say? Sometimes that is the best way to comfort somebody, by not saying a word. Today, I'm carrying my son to a funeral. It's at 4 o'clock. Tuesday night, my son's best friend's older brother committed suicide. I know. Now, my son is very much like my wife. She doesn't show very much emotion. My wife is a wonderful, amazing person, but she's not an overly emotional person. Tuesday, I get a phone call from my son. He said, Dad, Jackson's brother, Jordan, killed himself last night. He says, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to do. And, you know, boys nowadays, they're all macho, you know? They're like, oh, man, I'm so sorry, you know, that kind of thing. But David knew that a sorry wasn't going to cut it. And so my son just stopped talking to Jackson because he's like, I don't want to upset him. I don't know what to do. He was very much beyond comprehension. Well, Wednesday night, I was sick. I was feeding the dog on the back porch, and my son comes out. And, it's kind of odd for a 16-year-old boy to actually want to have a heart-to-heart with their dad. And he came out the front porch behind me. He's like, "Dad, I don't know what to do. I don't know what to do. My friend is hurting, and I don't know what to do." And I said, "Just be with him. Be with him. Cry if you need to cry." "No, I'm not going to cry. That's for wussies." I said, "Then just be there for him." And as we're talking, he was like, "Why would anybody want to kill themselves? Why would anybody want to put their family through this?" And I had to explain to him that when people are going through depression or mental crises, that they don't always think about others. It's just the pain that they're suffering right then and right there. And he didn't feel like there was a way out. Even though there was a way out, he did not see it, and he made a decision. Wrong decision. My son started to cry. 16 years old. I don't think I've seen my son cry since he was like 8, when he fell off the bicycle and he scraped his knee or something. Well, with that being said, we invited Jackson over to the house this weekend just to get him out of the house. It was good for Jackson, it was good for David. You see, my son cried because he needed to get it out of his system. He cried because he felt the pain and the emotion of his friend Jackson and his family. And then when my son started to cry, I started to cry. And anybody who's ever cried with a sinus infection knows that snot goes everywhere. And it's not very pretty, especially if you have a mustache. So, anyway, back to the woman. The woman with the bad self-image finally stopped crying. She says, "I haven't been able to cry for over 20 years, but seeing you cry today made more than that. Seeing a man cry. I began to see that you were crying all the tears I couldn't cry for myself, and you were crying for me. Thank you." A few weeks later, she wrote me in the letter and said that she had finally arrived home, and her tears had finally started. And for days and days she cried. And when this happens to me more than emotion. Everybody said that Jesus wept over Lazarus because Lazarus had died. If you catch the very beginning of the scripture, Jesus is telling his disciples that he knew Lazarus had died, and that he was going to perform a miracle to prove to everybody that he was the Son of Man, Son of dead. Bringing someone back from the dead.